Hey Beth, thanks for sending in your vibrato practice. I hope that in this video I can give you some pointers and maybe help you in your own technique. So the first thing I want to say is that you mentioned in your video that you're sometimes finding yourself doing the vibrato the way that you would on the cello. So you're basically applying your cello vibrato technique on the violin. And this reminded me of the time that I tried my hands on the cello, and I was essentially doing what you said, which, in my case, I was applying my violin vibrato on the cello, which wasn't the most ideal thing. So I would hold the cello in this way with my violin hold, and I would do vibrato. And I think there are subtle differences. So I, from seeing other cellists online, the way that they would approach the fingerboard of the cello, I'm seeing more people do it like this instead of this. So this is my violin hold, and this is what would be ideal for me to do on the cello. So yeah, that's the main difference. And if I were to translate that on the violin, say I do this and I just hold my violin like this, right? I mean, that doesn't look terrible. It looks okay. My thumb is way down here to maintain this position, but essentially it's going to print a different groove patterns on the fingertips here. So it's gonna look more horizontal instead of diagonal, because that's really the ultimate test. If you're holding the violin in the correct way, is that your fingertips will have more of a diagonal grooves on it. So let me see if I can show you. Let's see if I can erase that horizontal lines. So I'm gonna press the strings quite firmly and see if I can show you the pattern that I'm after. Okay, so can you see that it's more diagonal instead of horizontal? So it's more that way, and that's really the key, I think. If you're doing chords, then it's going to be the exception, I think. So it's going to print a different groove patterns on the finger, because obviously you're holding multiple notes with one finger, and yeah, that's really the only exception, I would say. So yeah, I would implore you to try and adjust the way that you're holding the violin. So instead of this, more like this. And it's going to be different. I mean, you have really lovely long fingers, and up here in third position I have short fingers, and I can still see my thumb over here. So see if you can adjust the way that you're holding the violin, and notice after each practice session how the grooves are printing on those fingertips. So yeah, that's the first thing. And then your question about how to become more proficient and do the vibrato motion faster, right? So I want to strip it back to its most basic components, and the way that I think about a vibrato motion is one oscillation, basically. So if we strip it back to its basic thing, it's an oscillation, and it's a repeating oscillation. So one oscillation, I would say, is not an up and down motion, but rather as an impulse. So instead of thinking about it as up, down, I would just think about it as 1, 2, 3, 4, an impulse, right? 2, 3, 4. And I would practice this slowly first, with or without a metronome. I mean, it depends on how comfortable you are, because I sometimes think that maybe this is a little bit too much, you know, just trying to figure out the motion and coordinating it with the bow, right? So maybe when you get comfortable, then you can add the metronome, but work on, even without the metronome, work on the evenness of your oscillations. So I would do 1 oscillation per beat, 2 oscillations per beat, and then triplets, and then 4 oscillations per beat. Let's see if I can show you. So I did 1 oscillation per beat, 2 oscillations, triplets, and then 4. I mean, it's probably not obvious because I was doing it very, very quickly. So maybe if I put on the metronome, maybe then it can become clearer. This is probably fast. Let's slow it down some. 2. If I can hit that D note. And then once you can do that for all of the fingers, then we can talk about connecting one finger to the next, right? And when someone is playing with a fast vibrato and kind of bouncing the vibrato from finger to finger, it's not very obvious to the naked eye that there's a moment in time when there's a pause and everything stops, right? So I think I saw this in one of Beth's video in Violin Lab. I think it's available here on YouTube as well, when the vibrato motion is slowed down. Yes, I think that's the first video I've ever seen of Beth explaining the vibrato motion. But basically there's a moment where everything kind of stops, and so you're doing the motion, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is in slow motion. Let's just pretend that it is, right? And then there's a stopping and then pausing of the fingers, and kind of you have to think about dropping the next finger and kind of transferring that vibrato motion to the next finger, right? 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And it's just a matter of being able to control that motion in the first place, because it's so hard, right? You're thinking about your bow hand and producing that sound with the bow while you're doing a different motion here. So it makes it more complicated. But I would say to really strip it down, like I said a while ago, is to focus on internalizing the beat and thinking about the oscillations as impulse. So say if I were how do I explain this? So if I were thinking about the bow hand, right, I would think about 4, let's say, semi-quaver notes, or I get confused sometimes with the British and the American way. So quaver is 8th note, so semi-quaver is the 16th note. So let's say one beat is, in one beat there are 4 16th notes. So you would do 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's with the bow, right? And then with the left hand, you're doing the same thing. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's kind of instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4. You're just feeling it as an impulse, right? So I don't know if you can see as well, but I placed the third finger, and then when I moved over to the fourth, I just stayed in this position. And this is one way to support your pinky, because it's very, I don't know, it can be very unstable. And one way to support that finger is by having both fingers on the string. I feel like this can cause unwanted tension if you're not doing it the right way, but basically I don't have much weight on this finger. I just leave this finger on the string without much weight on. Most of the movement is coming from the fourth, so and in your video I can see that you've unlocked those knuckles, the knuckles that are closest to the fingertip for the first 3 fingers, and I don't see any problem with your fourth finger, except that maybe it's doing this. So even though it's not in action, keep everything nice and curved. I mean, sometimes I see my pinky going up like this in preparation for maybe a reach. It's not what I'm trying to say is that we want to maintain nice curved fingers, and I myself have to, you know, tell myself to constantly be aware of that, even though it doesn't happen all the time. But yeah, it's nice to have the fingers nice and curved, as with the bow hand. So it's kind of mirroring each other in such a way. Nice and curved pinky, flexible to support the bow, and in the same way you want to do this as well. So the other thing is finger taps. If you feel like your pinky is not strong enough, then finger taps and really reinforce that curved position. So I think that should help. But yeah, I'm curious to see how well you're going to transition from the cello to the violin. You said that you've been playing for 20 years, and I'm in awe of that. I hope that I can do the same for the violin. I really do, so that I can work on the pieces that I want in the future. But yeah, thank you so much for sending in your video, and if you need any more help, I do have a membership on my YouTube channel where I am able to give out video response if you want to join. But yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you on my next video. Bye.